If you watched my last video, you know how important it is to keep grain out of your diet if you have autoimmune issues. But did you know that you can still be experiencing grain-induced symptoms even if you don't have grain in your diet? I'm Kristen, this is Kristen Unpoisoned, and on this channel, we take the poison out of everyday living, and today, we're going to do that by uncovering hidden sources of grain exposure. So I need to start this off by saying don't be afraid. This video is not to make you afraid of everything. Don't be afraid to leave your house. Don't be afraid to hang out with your friends and all that good stuff. Use this video as a guide if you're still experiencing unexplained autoimmune issues. You're probably having some micro-exposure to grain at some level that's still affecting you. For most people, the biggest reaction, of course, is going to be via eating grain, putting something in your mouth and ingesting it. But there are still other ways that grain exposure can really affect you. One way is through the air, through breathing it in into your lungs, and through your lungs it gets into your bloodstream pretty quickly. And the second way is through skin exposure, which is going to affect some people more than others, of course. So for best results, for the ultimate autoimmune healing, it's really going to be best to remove all grain from your life as far as you possibly can. Of course, don't worry about what you can't do, just focus on what you can. Secondhand exposure is probably the most common way most of us get grain exposure without realizing it, and there are a few different ways that can happen. The first way is through other people's food. Other people mean well, but if they don't realize the extent of what it means to cook for someone who has a grain allergy, they can accidentally really mess you up. Cross-contamination is almost impossible to avoid in a kitchen that, normally feeds people that eat grain. It could be as simple as cooking regular pasta on the stovetop, mixing it with a spoon, and then using that same spoon without a thorough cleaning and putting it into the food they're cooking for you. There are just so many different ways like that people can accidentally cross-contaminate the food that they're making for you. And also, most people aren't going to realize the extent of what they need to do. They're not going to look at all of the ingredients for everything that they're making for you, so it's very likely that someone else is going to inadvertently give you grain exposure. And really it's the same thing with restaurants. Cross-contamination, again, is a really, really easy thing to do on accident, even at a professional place like a restaurant. It's very difficult to eat in a restaurant and not accidentally get some kind of grain exposure. For myself at least, I haven't eaten gluten since 2016, or any kind of grain since 2016, and I would still react quite strongly to cross-contamination from a restaurant. So I just don't eat at restaurants. I cook all my food myself. But I was in Portland once for business, and I found a restaurant there called the Cultured Caveman that was completely grain-free, so I was actually able to order food from there, and it was amazing. But it did close down since the pandemic. But I did find 2 restaurants in the US that are completely grain-free and would be completely safe to eat at, so I am planning a road trip to Arizona and Colorado at some point. There's a restaurant in Arizona called the Sapiens Kitchen, and there's one in Colorado called Just Be Kitchen. And they're both completely grain-free and are completely safe for us to go to. So if y'all want to go on a road trip sometime, let's do it. There's also Paleo on the Go, a meal delivery service that offers delicious, chef-created, healthy, grain-free meals and ships to all 50 states in the US. I'll leave a link in the description below and in the comments if you'd like to try it out with $25 off on your first order. Another common way people get secondhand exposure to grain is through kissing. And you may or may not have thought about that before, but if you're a person just ate a sandwich, had a hamburger, ate a cinnamon roll, drank a beer, drank a McDonald's chocolate milkshake, and then they kiss you, that's going to be a problem because that's going to give you a pretty big exposure to grain, which is going to cause an autoimmune flare more than likely, depending on your certain flavor of autoimmune issue. If you're dating someone, married to someone or whatever who is not grain-free, you have to be really careful about when you're making out with them, I guess, because that could be a really big issue. It's the same with makeup and lip balm, chapstick, lipstick, that sort of thing. If you've seen my grain-free personal care video, you know I use Lauren Brooke makeup, and there is a lipstick there called Lip Color. It's just called Lip Color, and all of the lipsticks in the Lip Color line are completely grain-free. So if you're looking for lipstick, you can pick any of those and they'll work just fine for you. Another way that we get exposed to grain without eating it is via our lungs. When you breathe something in, it'll go to your lungs and through your lungs into your bloodstream. And there are a few different ways we can get grain exposure via breathing in. and I'll go over just a few of these. One way is via drywall. A lot of drywall contains wheat gluten, so just be careful when you're doing any kind of renovations or, anything in your walls. A second way we can breathe in grain unexpectedly is in the movie theater. Oftentimes the movie theater, the air in there is so saturated with grain, via the popcorn, that we can have a reaction to it. And I know that sounds crazy, but that actually happened to me. I was in a movie, and of course I wasn't eating the popcorn, but the air was full of it. And when I left and I looked in the mirror, there was a rash like all over my face. And that's one of the things that would happen to me with lupus, is I would get crazy rashes all the time. But yeah, luckily that one went away by the next day. It wasn't one that stuck around for a while, but definitely wanted to put movie theaters on the list here just in case that's something that might be happening to you guys. Another way we can be breathing in grain without really realizing it is if you live close to a bakery. Like if you live above a bakery or right next to a bakery and you're always breathing in that air from the bakery, then there's a big chance that that constant exposure is going to be detrimental to your healing. Dr. Osborne actually mentions that in his book, No Grain, No Pain. He had a patient once that lived, I think it was above a bakery, and didn't realize that that was the reason they weren't healing. Another way that you might be breathing in grain into your lungs and into your bloodstream is via fragrance. I don't know if you knew, but companies do not have to disclose what is in their fragrances. So if you use Febreze, those car air freshener thingies, really potent laundry detergent and dryer sheets, and those, little plugins and all that kind of stuff, there's a pretty good chance that you're breathing in grain within those ingredients. I'm actually going to dig more into that in the next week or so. Hopefully my next video will be on fragrance, so we can dig into that a little bit deeper. But that is something to keep in mind, because fragrance as a whole is not so good for you anyway, and it likely contains some grain. So just another thing to keep in mind. There are many ways that grain just hides in plain sight. Here are just a few of those ways. Envelopes. I don't know why I didn't think about it, but envelopes, the sealant, it contains grain. I licked an envelope once and I paid for that for 3 months. I think they make little pins that have like a sponge at the end of it that you can just wet the sponge and use instead. That I think was the last time that I had a big autoimmune reaction to something, was when I licked an envelope, and it just was so dumb. I feel like I should have known that. So warning to y'all, do not make the same mistake that I made. Another common way grain hides in plain sight is in bird seed. If you're feeding the birds, or if you're putting up food in a bird feeder, like in your backyard or wherever, the birdseed often contains corn and probably other grains. So just be careful if you're going to do that to not, get it on your skin or, too close to your face where you're breathing it in, so that you can just avoid being exposed to that. Another way you might be getting exposed to grain is through your personal care products. I made a whole video about that, which I will link up here somewhere for you to look at later. Now this one is in the kitchen, but it is a hidden source of grain because most people don't know about this. So spices, most spice brands actually use grain as fillers. So you have to be careful about the spice brands that you use. Okay, this one's kind of weird, but pillows and cushions can sometimes contain grain. Some of those really fancy higher end pillows are filled with buckwheat. Of course the pillow is going to be covered, but your face is like smashed on it all night, night after night. Breathing that in constantly, that could be a micro exposure that turns into a macro exposure over time. So if you are still experiencing unexplained autoimmune symptoms, you might want to switch out the buckwheat pillow. You also might consider skipping those neck pillows that are made for tension, that are filled with rice that you put in the microwave, you warm it up and you stick it on your neck. You might not react to it, you might react to it, but it's worth not using those and just using a heating pad or something like that instead, just to keep your exposure as low as possible. This one is tricky, but most medications and supplements use grain as fillers. But you can get medications made at a compounding pharmacy and they won't use grain fillers, so that's a much safer way to go. And for supplements, I personally always use Dr. Peter Osborne supplements. He's the author of No Grain, No Pain. I've talked about him a lot. So I just buy all my supplements from him. I will link in the description below to his supplement store, so you can take a look through there and maybe replace some of your supplements with his. Again, don't be afraid or overwhelmed. This video was not to make you afraid to leave your front door or to breathe. Just monitor yourself, monitor your symptoms, check in with how you're feeling. If you're having unexplained autoimmune issues, definitely use this video as a guide of things you can cut out to see if that will help. And just focus on what you can change and don't worry about what you can't. Let me know in the comments if this was helpful and if, like me, you've had a reaction to one of these random grain exposures. Thanks for watching, keep living an unpoisoned life, and I will see you next time. Bye!